47 individuals sat in the waiting area below, and none of them knew they were being watched. Instructor Realm Das stood behind the one-way glass of the observation deck, his forearms folded across his chest. Behind him, 12 cadets from the Galactic Security Academy prepared their scanning equipment and analysis tablets. This was their final exam. 3 years of training had come down to one simple task: find the threat. "You have 2 hours," Das announced, his voice flat and serious. "Somewhere in that waiting area is a planted operative. Your job is to identify them before time runs out. Use whatever tools you need. Bioscanners, behavioral analysis, thermal imaging. Everything is available to you." Cadet Ur, a young Brevion like Das himself, stepped forward eagerly. His amber eyes scanned the crowd below with sharp focus. "Sir, are there any restrictions?" "None. Observe freely. Analyze deeply. Trust nothing." The cadets spread out along the observation windows and began their work. The waiting area below had been designed to look like a standard transit hub. Rows of seats filled the space. Screens displayed fake arrival times. Soft music played through hidden speakers. It was perfectly ordinary, which made it the perfect testing ground. Das watched his students work, but his attention kept drifting to one specific seat. Row 3, middle section. A human woman sat there, perhaps 35 years old, with brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore plain civilian clothes and held a tablet in her hands. Every few minutes she took a sip from a beverage container. She looked like nothing. Nobody. That was the problem. "Sir, I have a preliminary assessment," Cadet Ur called out. He pointed toward the far corner of the waiting area. "The Durrani male, second row from the back. He has visible weapons on his belt, and his heart rate is elevated. He keeps scanning the exits." Das nodded slowly. "Continue your analysis." Cadet Sela, a pale-skinned mind with large dark eyes, pressed her fingers to her temples. Her species could read surface thoughts from a distance. "The hooded figure near the refreshment station," she said. "Their mind is completely shielded. I cannot read anything from them. That level of mental protection suggests training." "Noted." Cadet Goss, a massive Horvathi who stood nearly 8 feet tall, gestured toward the front rows. "The Cathroni businessman. He is sweating heavily and keeps touching his bag. Classic nervous behavior. He could be carrying something." One by one, the cadets identified their suspects. The Durrani mercenary. The shielded stranger. The nervous businessman. A twitching insectoid near the emergency exit. A pair of Salani traders who spoke in whispers. An elderly Brevion who had not moved in 40 minutes. Nobody mentioned row 3. Das let an hour pass before he spoke again. "Has anyone analyzed the human female?" "Row 3, middle section." The cadets looked at each other with confusion. Ur pulled up her bioscan data on his tablet. "Baseline human female. No weapons detected. Heart rate normal. Body temperature normal. She appears to be reading entertainment content on her device." He shrugged his upper shoulders. "Threat level negligible, sir." Sela nodded in agreement. "I attempted to scan her thoughts, but human minds are difficult. They are noisy and chaotic, like trying to listen to one voice in a crowded room. I detected no harmful intent, just scattered thinking about food and personal matters." "She is small," Goss added. "No natural weapons, no armor. Humans are not physically threatening compared to most species." Das said nothing. He simply turned back to the window. The woman in row 3 stretched her arms above her head, then stood. She walked casually to the refreshment station, refilled her beverage, and exchanged a few words with the vendor. Her body language was relaxed. Her movements were slow and unhurried. She smiled politely at a Cathroni child who ran past her. Then she returned to her seat and continued reading. Completely unremarkable. Ur muttered to himself and turned his attention back to the Durrani mercenary. Das remained still, but inside, a memory stirred. 30 years ago, he had been a field operative, young and confident, just like these cadets. He had tracked a weapons smuggling ring to a dead moon on the edge of Federation space. His team had been captured. They were scheduled for execution. A single human infiltrator had saved them all. Her name was Carol Briggs. She had killed 14 armed guards without firing a weapon. She used pipes, wires, environmental controls, and her own bare hands. Das had watched her move through that facility like death itself, and through it all, her expression never changed. She had worn the same calm face that the woman in row 3 wore now. Das walked to his private terminal and entered his security codes. He pulled up the woman's file. Annie Reeves. Occupation listed as civilian consultant. Security clearance, Obsidian. He stared at the screen. Obsidian clearance. He had served the Federation for 30 years and never encountered that classification level. It was above anything he had access to. Her file contained nothing else. No history, no assignments, no records. Just a name and a clearance level that should not exist. Down below, Annie Reeves turned a page on her tablet. For just a moment, her eyes lifted from the screen and looked directly at the observation window. Directly at Das. She smiled slightly. Then she returned to her reading as if nothing had happened. Das felt something cold move through him. He looked at his cadets, still focused on their obvious targets. They had no idea what sat among them. The most dangerous predators were never the ones who looked dangerous. Time continued to pass, and not a single cadet looked at row 3 again. 90 minutes had passed since the exam began. Cadet Ur stood before the main display screen, presenting his final analysis to Instructor Das and the other cadets. His confidence filled the room like a bright light. "The Drani mercenary is our threat," Ur declared. He pulled up bioscan data on the screen. His heart rate has remained elevated throughout the observation period. He carries 2 visible plasma pistols and a blade on his thigh. He has checked the emergency exits exactly 14 times. His behavior pattern matches known hostile reconnaissance. Das listened without expression. "Your confidence level?" 92%, sir." Cadet Sela stepped forward next. Her dark-mined eyes were certain. "I disagree with Cadet Ur. The hooded figure near the refreshment station is our target. I have attempted to read their thoughts 17 times. Each attempt has been blocked by military-grade mental shielding. No civilian would have such protection. They are hiding something significant." She paused. "Confidence level, 88%. Cadet Goss shook his massive Horvathi head. "Both of you are wrong. The Cathroni businessman is the threat. I have watched him for 90 minutes. He has touched his bag 43 times. He has wiped sweat from his face 26 times. His leg has not stopped shaking. He is carrying something in that bag, and he is terrified of being caught. Confidence level, 85%. Other cadets offered their own theories. The insectoid was acting strangely. The Saloni traders had exchanged suspicious glances. The elderly Brevion was too still, possibly in a meditative state to mask hostile intent. Each analysis was detailed. Each argument was logical. Each cadet had followed their training perfectly. None of them mentioned row 3. Das walked slowly to the observation window. Below, the waiting area continued its false routine. The Drani mercenary leaned against a pillar. The hooded figure stood motionless. The Cathroni businessman clutched his bag. And Annie Reeves sat in row 3, reading her tablet and occasionally sipping her drink. "Cadet Sela," Das said without turning around. "You mentioned that human minds are difficult to read. Explain." Sela seemed surprised by the question. "Human neural patterns are unusual, sir. Most species think in organized streams. One thought leads to another in a clear sequence. Humans think in multiple streams at once. It creates interference. Reading them feels like listening to several conversations simultaneously. Do you consider this a weakness?" Sela hesitated. "It makes them harder to read, sir. But it also makes them inefficient thinkers. They waste mental energy on scattered thoughts." Das almost smiled. "Almost. What do you know about human history, cadet?" The question confused the entire room. You're answered first. They joined the Federation 40 years ago, sir. They come from a planet called Earth. A rocky world with one moon. They are physically unremarkable. No natural weapons, no special abilities, no telepathy. They are considered a minor species. A minor species? Das repeated softly. And yet the Federation's Security Council voted 7-2 against their admission. Do you know why? Silence filled the observation deck. Das turned to face his students. Early contact teams reported that humans were disturbing. Not aggressive, not hostile. Just disturbing. During the first diplomatic meeting, a human female casually mentioned that she had already identified the best defensible position in the room and mapped 3 escape routes. She thought she was being polite. Making conversation. The cadets exchanged uncertain glances. Humans come from what we classify as a death world. Das continued. Their planet has extreme temperature variations, aggressive predators, poisonous plants, natural disasters, and a star that causes cellular damage if they stand beneath it too long. They evolve not through strength or speed, but through pattern recognition, through constant threat assessment, through preparation. He pointed at the window. That woman in row 3 has been in that seat for 90 minutes. In that time, she has identified every exit. She knows exactly how many steps it would take to reach each one. She has noted which individuals move slowly and which move quickly. She has already decided what objects nearby could be used as weapons. She has calculated how long it would take security to respond to an incident. Cadet Gauss shifted uncomfortably. How can you know that, sir? Because every human does it constantly, without effort. It is not training. It is instinct. Those scattered thoughts that Cadet Sela detected are not inefficiency. They are parallel processing. A human can hold a pleasant conversation while simultaneously running threat scenarios in the background of their mind. Yor looked down at his tablet. But her bioscan showed nothing unusual. No elevated heart rate, no stress indicators, no signs of hostile intent. Humans can control their biological responses, Das said. They can slow their heartbeat through breathing techniques. They can suppress perspiration through mental focus. They can lie without any physical tells. They evolved to hide their fear from predators that could smell it. The room went quiet. Down below, Annie Reeves stood up again. She walked to a waste receptacle and discarded her empty cup. She stretched her back. She looked around the waiting area with casual, bored interest. Then her eyes found the observation window again. She held the gaze for exactly 2 seconds before returning to her seat. She knows we are watching, Sela whispered. She knew from the moment she sat down, Das replied. She has known exactly where every camera and sensor is located since she entered this facility. And yet she has not changed her behavior once, because she does not need to. The timer on the wall showed 15 minutes remaining. The cadets were no longer looking at the mercenary, or the hooded figure, or the nervous businessman. They were all staring at row 3. But Das knew it was already too late. 30 years fell away like dust. Das remembered the cold. The syndicate prison on that dead moon had no heating system. Prisoners were kept alive just long enough to be useful, then discarded. His team of 6 had been captured during a failed raid on a weapons facility. They were scheduled for execution at dawn. He remembered the cell. Gray walls, dim lighting, the smell of fear from his teammates. They had tried everything. Picking the lock. Breaking the hinges. Calling for help on frequencies that no one would hear. Nothing worked. Then the lights went out. Das had thought it was the end. He had prepared himself for death. But instead of guards coming to kill them, he heard something else. Footsteps, soft and steady, moving through the corridor outside their cell. A figure appeared at the door. Human. Female. Average height. Brown hair tied back. She wore no armor. She carried no visible weapons. Her expression was completely calm. "Stay quiet," she said. "Follow me. Do exactly what I say." Her name was Carol Briggs. She had been sent alone to extract them. Doss had thought it was a joke. One human against a facility with 40 armed guards. But Carol did not wait for questions. She opened their cell with a code she had somehow obtained and led them into the darkness. What happened next still visited Doss in his dreams. Carol moved through that facility as though she had built it herself. She knew every corridor, every camera, every patrol route. When guards appeared, she did not hide. She struck fast and silent. A pipe torn from the wall became a weapon. A guard's own blade was turned against him. She used doors, corners, and shadows as instruments of precision. Doss watched her neutralize 3 guards in 7 seconds. She did not make a sound. Neither did they. At one point, a Horvathi guard caught them in a supply room. The creature was massive, armed with a plasma rifle. It should have been impossible for a human to overcome. Carol did not try to fight strength with strength. She moved inside his reach before he could aim. Her hands found pressure points that Doss had never known existed. The Horvathi dropped his weapon. Carol grabbed his head and twisted. The sound was quiet and final. 14 guards died that night. Carol killed them all without firing a single shot. When they finally reached the extraction point, Doss could not stop staring at her. Her clothes were torn. She had blood on her hands. A cut on her cheek dripped red. But her eyes were the same as when she had first opened their cell door. Calm. Focused. Empty of emotion. How? Doss had asked her. How did you do that? Carol looked at him with something like confusion. Do what? Kill 14 armed soldiers by yourself. She shrugged. It was such a small, casual gesture. I found things to use. I watched how they moved. I took them one at a time. She wiped blood from her face with the back of her hand. It is just problem solving. Just problem solving. Doss had spent the next 30 years studying humans. He read every report from early contact missions. He interviewed soldiers who had served alongside human operatives. He collected data on their home world, their history, their psychology. What he learned stayed with him. Humans did not see violence the way other species did. For most beings in the galaxy, fighting was a response to danger, something you did when threatened. For humans, it was a constant calculation. They walked through life measuring distances, noting objects, tracking movements. They did not plan for violence because they expected it. They planned for it because not planning felt wrong. Their ancient ancestors had been prey animals. Small and weak on a world full of predators. They survived by being aware, by never relaxing, by treating every moment as a potential threat. 10,000 years of civilization had not erased those instincts. It had only hidden them beneath a layer of smiles and pleasant conversation. Now Doss stood in the observation deck, watching another human woman sit quietly in row 3. Annie Reeves looked nothing like Carol Briggs. Different face, different build, different age. But she had the same stillness. The same quiet awareness. The same eyes that saw everything while appearing to see nothing. His cadets had spent 2 hours analyzing obvious threats. They had used advanced technology and specialized training. They had identified dangerous individuals through weapons, behavior, and mental shielding. And they had completely missed the human, because Annie did not look dangerous. She looked boring. She looked like someone you would pass on a street without a second glance. She looked like nothing at all. That was the mask humans wore. They had evolved to conceal their true nature from predators far more deadly than anything the wider galaxy had ever produced. They could pretend to be harmless because pretending was survival. But underneath that mask was something old, and patient, and very efficient. Doss checked the timer. 5 minutes remained. He looked at his cadets. They were finally paying attention to row 3, but it did not matter. They had already failed. The lesson would be delivered soon. Down below, Annie Reeves turned another page on her tablet. To anyone watching, she was just a bored traveler waiting for her transport. Doss knew better. He had seen what humans could do when the mask came off. He had the scars to prove it. The timer reached 0. Instructor Doss turned to face his cadets. Time is up. Present your final answers. The room was tense. For the last 5 minutes, every cadet had been staring at row 3, but none of them had changed their official assessments. Changing an answer at the last moment would look like panic. It would suggest uncertainty. No cadet wanted to appear weak. Yours spoke first. The Drani mercenary. Final answer. The hooded figure, Sela said. The Cathroni businessman, Goss added. One by one, the other cadets locked in their choices. The insectoid. The Saloni traders. The elderly Brevian. Every threatening individual in the waiting area was selected at least once. Nobody chose Annie Reeves. Das nodded slowly. You have all failed. The words hit the room like a cold wind. Cadets looked at each other in shock and disbelief. 3 years of training. Perfect grades. Outstanding evaluations. All of it ended with failure. The exercise will now conclude, Das said. He pressed a button on his console connecting to the waiting area's speaker system. The cadets expected the planted threat to reveal themselves. That was how these tests always worked. The hidden operative would stand, show their concealed weapon, and demonstrate how close they had come to success. Instead, Annie Reeves calmly rose from her seat in row 3. Exercise concluded, she said. Her voice was clear and firm. All assets stand down. The Drani mercenary immediately relaxed. He removed his weapons and set them on the floor. The hooded figure pushed back their hood, revealing a young Brevian female with a communication device in her ear. The nervous Cathroni businessman stopped sweating and opened his bag to show it was completely empty. The cadets watched in disbelief as every threatening individual in the waiting area turned toward Annie and waited for instructions. They were all working for her. Yor whispered. Das said nothing. Annie spoke to the assembled group below. Report to debriefing room 7. Full analysis in 1 hour. Then she walked toward the stairs that led to the observation deck. The cadets backed away from the door as it opened. Annie Reeves entered the room. She was shorter than most of them. Older. Unremarkable in every physical way. She looked like someone's mother or aunt. She looked like a person you would trust to watch your belongings while you stepped away for a moment. But now the cadets could not stop staring at her. My name is Annie Reeves, she said. I am the Director of Field Operations for Federation Black Operations. I have been observing your examination from the beginning. Sela's voice trembled. You were the threat. No. Annie smiled slightly. I was the evaluator. The scenario was reversed. Your job was to find me. My job was to determine if any of you were worth recruiting. She walked slowly along the observation windows, looking down at the empty waiting area below. Her movements were casual, unhurried, but every cadet noticed how she positioned herself. Never with her back to the door. Never too close to anyone. Always near objects that could serve as tools. You look for threats the way your species has always recognized them, Annie said. Weapons. Size. Aggression. Shielded minds. Nervous behavior. These are valid indicators, but they are not the only indicators. She turned to face them. I identified 17 ways to neutralize everyone in that waiting area using objects within arm's reach. I mapped every exit within the first 30 seconds. I timed every patrol and calculated security response windows. I profiled each of your observation patterns through the glass. Cadet Goss shifted uncomfortably. While reading your tablet? I was reading recipes for banana bread, Annie said. Humans can multitask. The room was silent. Your bioskin showed nothing because I wanted it to show nothing. Your telepathy found only noise because that is what human minds produce by nature. Your behavioral analysis found no threat indicators because I chose not to produce any. She paused. I have spent 30 years learning to be invisible. It is not deception. It is survival. She looked at Das. Something passed between them. Recognition. Understanding. You remembered, she said quietly. Carol sends her regards. Das inclined his head. She taught me everything I know about humans. She taught all of us. Annie turned back to the cadets. Carol Briggs was my instructor when I joined the service. She showed me that the greatest weapon a human possesses is not strength, or speed, or technology. It is the ability to be dismissed. To be ignored. To be nothing. Yor found his voice. Why are you telling us this? Because you need to understand what you missed. The Federation faces threats from species who use the same techniques. Infiltrators. Assassins. Agents who hide in plain sight. If you cannot see a human doing it, you cannot see anyone doing it. She walked to the center of the room and stood perfectly still. For a moment, she let the mask drop. The pleasant expression faded. Her eyes became hard and focused. Her posture shifted into something that radiated controlled, patient danger. The cadets felt it immediately. Something old and predatory looking out at them from behind a human face. Then Annie smiled, and the mask returned. She was just a tired, middle-aged woman again. Harmless. Forgettable. That, she said quietly, is what you missed. That is why you failed. She looked at each cadet in turn. But your education is not finished. There is one more test. Annie asked each cadet to approach her one at a time. Walk toward me as you normally would, she instructed. Stop when you feel comfortable. Cadet Yor went first. He walked with the confidence of someone who had trained for years in combat assessment. He stopped about 2 meters away. Look at my hands, Annie said. Yor looked. Her hands hung loosely at her sides, relaxed and unthreatening. My left hand is 4 inches from a stylus on that console, Annie said. The stylus can penetrate a brevion eye socket with enough force. My right hand is 6 inches from the edge of this tablet. The edge is thin enough to crush a windpipe. Annie had not moved. Her voice remained calm and pleasant. I identified these positions before you took your first step. Yor stepped back quickly. I am not trying to frighten you, Annie said. I am showing you how humans think. We do this constantly, with everyone. It is not aggression. It is preparation. Cadet Sela approached next. The mind female moved cautiously, her telepathic senses reaching outward. You feel nothing hostile from me, Annie said. That is correct. I have no desire to harm you. But desire and capability are different things. I know exactly where to strike a mind to disable telepathic function. I know how long your species requires to recover from sensory overload. I know these things the same way I know how to open a door. Sela's dark eyes widened. You learned this to hurt us. I learned this to understand you. Knowledge is neutral. What matters is how it is used. And he gestured for her to step aside. Next. Cadet Goss approached slowly. The massive Horvathi towered over Annie by more than 2 feet. His arms were thick with muscle. His hands could crush stone. Annie looked up at him without any trace of fear. Your size makes you feel safe, she said. You believe you could stop me before I could hurt you. You are wrong. Your species has 3 vulnerable points that require no strength to damage. Your throat is unprotected. Your inner knee joints bend in ways that cannot resist lateral pressure. And your eyes, like most species, do not respond well to sudden trauma. Goss did not move, but something in his posture changed. He was no longer looking at a small human woman. He was looking at something else entirely. This is not cruelty, Annie said softly. This is what it means to be human. We grew up on a world where everything wanted to kill us. The weather, the animals, the plants, the water, even our own sun damages us if we stand beneath it too long. We developed no armor, no venom, no claws. Instead, we developed pattern recognition. We developed constant vigilance. We developed the ability to find weakness in anything. She turned to address all the cadets. Every human you will ever meet has already decided how they would fight you. It happens automatically. Within seconds of meeting someone, we have identified their vulnerable points, mapped the exits, and run through our responses. We do not think about it. It simply happens. You looked disturbed. That sounds exhausting. It is, Annie admitted. Humans have high rates of anxiety disorders. Our minds never truly rest. We are always watching, always preparing, always afraid on some level that something is coming. She smiled, and there was something sad behind it. 10,000 years of civilization has not erased this. We just learned to hide it. Cadet Sela stepped forward again. If humans are so dangerous, why are you not feared across the galaxy? Annie's expression softened. Because we are also the species that runs into burning buildings to save strangers. We form bonds with creatures that could kill us. We adopt predators as pets. We risk our lives for beings we have never met. She paused to let this settle. Humans are not threats by default. We are protectors. The same instincts that make us dangerous also make us loyal. The same pattern recognition that identifies weaknesses also identifies who needs help. The same preparation that readies us for violence also readies us for sacrifice. Das spoke from his position by the window. Carol Briggs could have killed anyone in that facility. Instead, she rescued 6 strangers at great risk to herself. She nearly died protecting us. Annie nodded. That is the truth about humans that most species miss. We are dangerous because we are prepared. We are trusted because we use that preparation to protect. The two things are not separate. They are the same thing. She looked at each cadet with something almost like warmth. You failed this test because you searched for threats in the wrong way. You looked for aggression, for hostility, for obvious danger. But the most dangerous beings in the galaxy are often the ones who seem harmless. The ones who smile while they calculate. The ones who help while they assess. Cadet Goss asked the question that was on every cadet's mind. How do we defend against someone like you? Annie laughed softly. It was a surprisingly gentle sound. You do not try to defend against humans. You try to make sure we are on your side. Give us something to protect, and we will die for it. Give us someone to care about, and we will move mountains for them. Her eyes found Das again. Carol still sends me updates about the Brevion team she rescued. She considers them family. She would still fight for any of them without hesitation. The room was quiet. No, Annie said, her voice shifting back to professional calm. Your final test awaits. And this time, you will need to be smarter. The waiting area had been refilled with new individuals. Annie stood with the cadets in the observation deck, explaining their final challenge. 42 civilians are now seated below. 3 of them are human infiltrators trained to blend in. Your task is to go down there, interact with them naturally, and identify the humans. Cadet Yer studied the crowd. How do we identify them if they have no biological tells? That is the test, Annie said. You have been taught what makes humans dangerous. Now show me you can apply that knowledge. The cadets descended into the waiting area. For 1 hour, they moved through the crowd, starting conversations, asking questions, watching body language. They had learned that humans constantly assess threats. That human minds run parallel calculations. That humans notice everything while appearing to notice nothing. Now they searched for those patterns. You're focused on a quiet Salani male in the corner. The individual seemed calm, but his eyes moved constantly. He tracked every person who walked past. He sat with his back to the wall, facing the exits. Sela approached a middle-aged Brevion female reading a tablet. The woman smiled pleasantly, but when a child ran past, Sela noticed something. The woman's hand twitched slightly toward a heavy object on the table beside her. The movement was subtle, almost invisible. But it was there. Goss identified a young Cathroni male who seemed too relaxed. The individual had positioned himself near an emergency exit and had not touched his beverage in 30 minutes. He was watching without appearing to watch. After 60 minutes, the cadets returned to the observation deck with their assessments. Annie listened to each report carefully. Yer identified the Salani in the corner. Sela identified the Brevion female with the tablet. Goss identified the Cathroni near the exit. Each of the other cadets named their own suspect. All of them had identified individuals displaying human-like behaviors. Constant awareness. Subtle positioning. Hidden vigilance. Annie nodded slowly. Interesting choices. All of you found individuals who matched the patterns I described. Yer felt a spark of hope. Did we pass? No. The word fell like a stone. There were no human infiltrators in that waiting area. The cadets stared at her in disbelief. Annie continued calmly. The individuals you identified were aliens who had been trained to mimic human behavioral patterns. They were actors, plants, designed to see if you would fall into a new trap. Sela's face went pale. We became too focused on finding humans. Exactly. Annie walked to the observation window. The first test taught you what to look for. This test taught you not to become obsessed with one threat while ignoring all others. The Salani that you identified was an actor. But there was a real smuggler in row 7 that no one noticed, because everyone was hunting for humans. Goss lowered his head. We overcorrected. You overcorrected, Annie agreed. The most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not a species. It is assumption. First, you assumed humans were harmless because we looked harmless. Then you assumed that everyone acting like a human must be dangerous. Both assumptions are wrong. She turned to face them. True threat assessment requires balance. You must consider all possibilities without becoming fixated on any single one. You must use knowledge without becoming enslaved to it. Das stepped forward. Did anyone pass? Annie was quiet for a moment. One cadet came close. Everyone looked at each other. Cadet Ure. Annie met the young Brevian's eyes. You were the only one who admitted to me that you could not reliably identify a human through interaction alone. Instead of guessing, you profiled for behavior regardless of species. You found someone suspicious who happened to be an actor, but your methodology was sound. Ure did not look triumphant. He looked humbled. You will receive additional training, Annie said. The rest of you must retake this course. I suggest you remember what you learned today. An hour later, Annie walked through the shuttle bay with Das at her side. The station hummed quietly around them. Carol retired 2 years ago, Annie said as they walked. She has 3 grandchildren now. She teaches them to fish and tells them stories about the stars. Das smiled slightly. Does she still maintain situational awareness at family dinners? Always. She knows exactly how far each grandchild is from the nearest exit at all times. Annie's voice carried warmth and amusement in equal measure. Old habits die hard. Annie stopped at her shuttle. She speaks highly of you, Remington. She says you are the bravest Brevian she ever met. She saved my life. I owe her everything. Then do what she would do. Train these cadets properly. Help them see what they are missing. Annie shook his hand firmly. The galaxy needs people who can spot real threats without manufacturing false ones. She boarded her shuttle. A young Brevian porter helped carry her single bag. Traveling for business? He asked politely. Annie smiled warmly. Just visiting old friends. The shuttle lifted off and disappeared into the darkness between stars. The porter returned to his duties. He would never know that he had just stood next to the most dangerous person he would ever meet in his life. He would never know that she had identified 3 escape routes, 2 potential weapons, and his exact response time within 10 seconds of his approach. She had been very pleasant. That was the point.